The deadlift is a great full body posterior chain exercise for runners. It works on activating the glutes, stabilizing the low back, and everything working in coordination. When you think about the running motion, you actually do have a hip hinge, which is what a deadlift is. So when you run, it's a little bit different than a deadlift where you're bending over and picking up a weight, but when you are running, you're taking that hip, you're flexing it, and then you're extending that hip, which is all about low back stabilization and glute activation. So it's a little bit different than the running motion, but it's a great way to strengthen up those muscles in the gym where you can load things up with a little bit heavier weight, and you can also really focus on proper technique and lifting really effectively. When you put it all together, that means if you're working on your deadlifts, you're gonna have a more efficient, stronger, and injury-resistant running stride. Let's take a look at how to do it. To set up for a deadlift, you're gonna add your weight onto the bar on the ground. And one of the key things that you wanna go for with safety here is you wanna make sure that you're using bar clips, which are gonna go onto the end of the bar. And those are just gonna make sure that the weights don't slide off. With a deadlift, when you touch the weight to the ground in between your reps, it can vibrate the weights and they can slide a little bit outwards. That's gonna make it a little bit unbalanced, and they can even fall off if you are a little bit aggressive with how hard you hit the bar on the ground. So you wanna make sure that you're using those weight clips. That's gonna hold the plates on and make sure that your weights don't move around on you. Beyond that, the weight's gonna sit on the ground attached to the bar, and you're gonna get yourself set up by walking up to the bar, and then you're ready to go. The movement to do a proper deadlift can be broken into two different phases, the first half and the second half. So the first half, the movement that you're doing is very similar to if you were doing a leg press. So most of that movement, most of the action is coming from extending at the knee. The top half of it, all that movement is coming from extending at the hip. So when you do that deadlift, you're gonna set yourself up in front of the bar. You want the bar to be just in front of your shins. So you can either step into the bar and get set, or you can start a little bit back and just kind of roll the weight towards you until you get it in the right spot. Then when you grab onto the bar, you want to be just a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. One thing to keep in mind is the wider you go with your arms, the lower you're going to have to drop that weight. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So you don't want to go too wide with your arms. You want to keep them just a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. So when I get it set up here, I'm going to bring that weight into me, and I've got it set up. So I've got a couple finger widths between my shin and the bar, and I've got a nice bend in my knee here, and my knees are about over top of my toes. From here, again, grabbing just a little bit wider than shoulder width apart, and then as I get set to lift, I'm going to come underneath the bar here, and you can see I've got a nice curve to the low back here, and the rest of my spine is stacked and nice and strong. So the first half of that movement, I'm pressing down with my legs until I get to that bar to about my knees. And then the rest of the movement from here is gonna be more of an extension at the hip. So the top half of that motion is a hip hinge like this. And the bottom half of that motion is a leg press like this. So when you put it all together, you're starting from here, you're pressing all the way up, and it's one smooth motion, but it's combined of those two different components. When you put it all together, you're gonna set that weight onto the ground for just a brief second in between each rep. So you're gonna come down to the ground, touch that weight, come up again, and back down. When you get to the top, just make sure that you add a little bit of a squeeze with your glutes, a little bit of that last hip extension, just to make sure you get the most out of the glute activation for this exercise. To increase your difficulty with a deadlift, you're gonna wanna increase by 5 to 10 pounds on each side. Is one thing to keep in mind with a deadlift, because you have weight on both ends of the bar, if you add 5 pounds to each side, just remember that's increasing your total weight by 10 pounds. So when you're doing your deadlifts, if you feel like you're getting close to the kind of the maximum that you're able to do, but you want to add a little bit more, 5 pounds a side is perfect. If you feel like you still have some room to go, then you can add 10 on each side. Two common trouble areas for runners when doing deadlifts are not having enough mobility through the hip and the hamstring to be able to get down low enough, and also not being able to maintain stability of the spine while you're lifting. So a couple things you can do if you have any of these issues. If you have that hamstring issue where if you have really tight hamstrings or really tight hips and you're not able to get all the way down to pick that weight up, You can either pick the weight up off of a rack and not go all the way down when you do those deadlifts. The other thing you can do is if you have a little bit of a platform that you can set that weight on, whether that's something like a short box or a stack of a couple of plates, you can set that on the ground. That's gonna elevate that ending position of the bar, and it's gonna let you still do an effective deadlift without risking injury or bad form when you're trying to get all the way down to the ground. If you find when you do your deadlifts that you're not able to maintain the stability of your spine as you go through it, the other thing you can do is work on just a Romanian deadlift or even a dumbbell good morning. Essentially just working the top section of that motion, working on keeping and maintaining the curve of that low back, the stability through your upper spine. As you're setting a dumbbell on your shoulders here, coming forwards until you feel that hamstring stretch, and coming all the way back up. You can work on that outside of when you're actually doing deadlifts, just making sure that you have good activation, that you have good stability in those different muscle groups. And then that's gonna transfer over when you actually do go deadlift. You're gonna be able to lift a little bit heavier and you're gonna be a little bit safer.